This video is going to be about my recent interview with Stefan Molyneux, which is originally supposed to be a debate about the subjective theory of value. As some of you may know, I reject the theory of subjective theory of value. In place of it, I suggest that I propose that all value is objective. But in this debate, it got off track. Let me play the video and go and analyze each part as we go.
Is the subjective theory of value a valid claim?
Are you there?
Yeah. Hey, Steph.
Hello.
Hi. Yeah. So I always get into debates about value and what it is, and people always reference. I know a lot of libertarians like to reference subjective theory of value from the Austrian school.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I just knowing a little about it, kind of reject it.
Go on.
So like, I feel like all value is objective.
All value is objective.
Yeah. It's because I partition reality such that subjective things is just a subset of objective things. Okay, here's where I made the first error. I did not need this for my argument against the subjective theory of value. So I've been bumped twice before in the show, and I kind of wasn't prepared for the interview. So I brought up a topic that I've been playing around with in my head for a little while. I've actually fleshed it out. I've just never presented it to anybody. So when I try to verbally present it to Steph without any notes, I made a lot of mistakes. And well, the first half of this interview, I think, was Stefan's fault. His inability to be flexible, but rigorous with logic. The second half was the whole confusion there. I think was in part due to my choice of words when defining objective. But let's get on with it. So at this point, I was bringing up my idea about how to make things more logically consistent, or how to make more sense of reality by putting subjective objects as a subset of objective objects, and saying objective objects is kind of redundant. So by doing that, what that does is that it puts the mind, or anyone's mind, inside of objective reality. To say that a mind, or anyone's mind, even your own, is outside of reality is kind of absurd to me. And that was the whole reason why I chose to redefine these terms, to make more sense of reality. It's analogous to saying that all artificial action is inside of natural action, because it makes no sense to say that human action is outside of nature, because nature created humans. So saying that human action is artificial and outside of nature is contradictory to the fact that nature created us. So by redefining artificial as a subset of natural, it just makes more logical consistency, because of the fact that we're created by nature, we're molded by nature and natural selection. All our traits are governed by natural selection. We still abide by evolutionary processes, and so that to say that artificial is somehow a special set, I'm thinking it's the human condition, where it wants to make it seem more special than it is, since it's talking about itself. So the tendency for the human conscience is to somehow distinguish itself from everything else. For instance, it's kind of a tendency for people not to want to consider themselves animals, when we're just a subset of the animal kingdom. While people in a casual setting will say that humans are distinguished from animals when we're actually a subset of it, and that's the whole idea when doing this redefining. Plus, it actually makes a lot more logical sense when constructing an objective philosophy. Um, when you say weird things like the mind's outside of reality, and you start to wonder the definition of outside of reality. There's no such thing as outside of reality. It doesn't make sense to say something is outside of reality. Anytime you think of something, you bring it within reality. There might not be an instance of it in reality. It might be purely in your head as an image in your head, but that image in your head exists in reality. So that's the whole thing about redefining, why I chose to try to redefine it as such. So what I do is I get reality, call that objective. Everything in there is composed of objects. All reality is composed of objects. Each object is objective. That's kind of being redundant because objective is anything that has to do with an object. Anything that has to do with being an object, to be more precise, I should have said in the interview. So anything that's an object is objective. And therefore, even subjective objects, since they're objects, they're objective by default. And that's what I was trying to get across here with my definition. But Steph, somewhere along the line, looked up the definition and read the declaration that they were mutually exclusive or opposing each other, and kept holding on to that. Wouldn't let me present my new definition that actually makes more sense of reality. Because I'll show later that the definitions that he actually looked up is actually logically inconsistent. It's contradictory, and I can prove that with a mathematical argument. So let's proceed. In other words, all subjective things are objective.
What?
Now, I just want to point out that the people watching this video, Steph has kind of like an advantage here as far as him getting the audience to his wave pattern, right? You don't want any wave interference, or the waves will start canceling out. In other words, they'll understand his side better just because he has the element of video and I don't. So when he's doing hand gestures, he's laughing at me. He's doing face palms. It has a psychological effect on the viewer where they're actually seeing that, getting as frustrated as he am when I'm having trouble with verbalizing my argument, and right away they start to emotionally reject my claims, just as he is doing. So that's the thing. This video, if you kind of pay attention and watch the video and hear both arguments, just the fact that he has the video actually creates a bias, maybe an unconscious bias with the viewer. And so let's just proceed. So when he laughs, when you see him laugh, it makes an emotional argument to the viewer. So.
Sorry, you got to say when you end up something with all subjective things that are objective. I think that we are in not necessarily the easiest to comprehend land of philosophy.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
This is kind of like one of the things that I don't understand why people think they're mutually exclusive. Meaning that something cannot be both at the same time, both objective and subjective at the same time. I think
because of the Aristotelian law of non-contradiction, right? I mean, because of logic, right? So something cannot be itself and the opposite of itself at the same time, right? A number can't be both 4 and -4 at the same time.
That's if you define it as mutually exclusive, right?
No, the definition of subjective and objective are not exactly opposites, but certainly not the same thing, right? So subjective is that which is open to my interpretation or is subject to my evaluation, whereas objective is something that the measurement of which is independent of my consciousness, right? So I may say something looks brown, but there's a wavelength, right? The wavelength is objective. My subjective experience of color is different than the objective measure of the wavelength of the light. Yeah. So it's not just semantics to say that subjective and objective aren't the same thing. And you can't define them as the same thing.
I agree wholeheartedly with the distinction between your opinion and what the measurement of an actual object is. So, like with your example with color, there are two things there that you're referring to: your opinion of the color and the color itself. both to me are objects, which you can make true and false statements about. I can determine your opinion of the color just based on what you tell me, or I can try to determine your opinion on the color, but it's not the color itself. So when people refer
wait, hang on. What do you mean you can determine my opinion of the color?
I can always ask you.
I can always lie.
Yeah, and I can. Okay, so just like you said, objective things, they don't.
Wavelength won't lie. A wavelength, the spectrometer or whatever they use, the wavelength machine is not going to lie, right?
Yeah, your ability to measure a wavelength is going to be limited, right? The precision of any instrument is always going to be limited. You're never going to know the true actual wavelength. It's virtually impossible to know within a certain unit of measurement.
Yes, but that's not what I'm saying. You're moving the goalpost. The wavelength-ometer is not going to lie, whereas a person can lie, right?
But it won't be accurate to the actual truth, right? There's always going to be some.
Well, no. Hang on. If you've got a Platonic version of the truth, or the Kantian version of the truth, which is that we can only know our sense data experience of things. We can't know the things in themselves. And I can't get the perfect, exact, accurate, blah, blah, blah wavelength. But there is no such thing as the perfect, exact, accurate wavelength. Right? Because it's oscillating. The light is changing. The machine, you get to as close of the truth as humanly possible. I mean, but saying we can never go exactly 100% north doesn't mean there's no difference between heading north and heading south, right? So that this idea that it's not 100% accurate, pure, Platonic, perfect, godlike truth, which is an impossible standard which doesn't really apply and therefore can't be a standard, doesn't have anything to do with the fact that wavelength is objective and color is subjective.
So, okay, so I mean, your ability to know something, the fact that an object exists doesn't depend on whether you can evaluate it or not. Right? So I think we can safely assume that when you refer to a specific beam of light and you refer to a specific cycle of it, that wavelength will have some objective number that you probably never know to within a certain precise measurement, right?
But it's infinitely more precise than me saying it's brown, because even if I'm not lying, when I was a teenager, I used to work in a shaking machine. You'd open it, 2 red cards, he'll say which one or whatever, right? If there's some self-evident, I always get suspicious when people do that. Self-evident, I always get suspicious.
If you think about it in sets, I'm saying that subjective is a subset of objective. And when I define subjective, I'm saying. Okay, hang on, slow down. I always hate it when people run past with their most important statements and keep going as if they're. It's okay. At this point, it's counterintuitive.
It's not the same as objective, right? And you can't say that subjective is a subset of objective.
It depends how you define them, right?
No, this is logic. Subjective is my internal experience that cannot be verified by external means. Objective is external phenomenon that can be defined by objective means.
I think
they're not the same thing. You can't say that subjective is a subset of objective.
I think you're adding to the definition. You added that part where I cannot determine what your opinion is. I mean, ultimately,
no, because if you can objectively determine what.
Yeah. So here he said subjective is something internal, right? I mean, your opinion can be determined. I mean, you can torture the guy. Technology can come along where you can actually probably make the same images the guy's seeing from his head, right? So this is all because it's an object. So you can just the fact you can theoretically determine it through ways, either through compulsion, through scientific means. Just because the technology doesn't exist doesn't mean the technology to detect something doesn't exist doesn't mean the object doesn't exist, right? So as far as opinion is concerned, I mean, you know it exists. Just because you can't define it and what it is, I know Steph has an opinion about what I'm saying. I may not know what it is, but obviously from the video I probably do. But um, you can detect these things. You can get hints from how they act, right? I mean, and it gives you some definition of it. And just because I don't have a perfect definition of it, as far as from an external point of view perspective, doesn't mean it's not an it's not an object. Actually, it's evidence toward that's an object. I'm perceiving something, and I'm trying to determine its value. Actually, what Steph's thinking about my my hypothesis here, which is obviously he thinks is ridiculous because it's kind of counterintuitive, right? In a casual setting, everyone wants to oppose. Everyone thinks that they're complements of each other, objective and subjective. Again, that doesn't make sense, and later I'll show why. But it makes more sense just to say the complement of subjective is just another set called non-subjective. And when you do that, everything starts to make a little more sense. But
my opinion is it's objective.
Yes, I can always ask you. And
no, asking doesn't make it objective. Otherwise, there'd be no such thing as a court of law. They'd just go up to someone and say, "Did you kill this guy?" And he'd say, "No." And they'd be like, "Well, that's an objective answer to me." Or he'd say, "Yes, I did." It's like, oh.
See in here, he's conflating objective with truth, which he often does, right? Subjective meaning false or capable of being false, and objective meaning true. And he's conflating the two. And the way I subdivide subjective objects is if they refer to an actual object perfectly, or if it's a general description and it refers to the object generally, then it's true, or that object exists the way he defines it. And so you can subcategorize subjective objects into true opinion and false opinion. And there's also definition, which is true by default. So you can call that internal definition as true opinion.
That can't be a false confession because subjective is objective, and we don't need any proof for anything.
we first agree that objects don't roll.
See, again, he's conflating objective and subjective with truth and falsehood, which is a conflation.
On us knowing that they exist to exist. Right? It's not dependent on us knowing about it or what it is or what
objective. I'll go one step further. Objective is everything in the universe that is still valid, true, and has existence when there are no human beings in the universe.
Okay, so
So you see that this, just the definition he gave here, this is true for opinion, right? Opinion does not change when you give a time coordinate, right? Your opinion 2 days ago must stay the same. You can't change the things in the past. So it fits that criteria. So again, with what he says, you can only change. You can't change your opinion. Actually, it's fixed through time, given that each opinion object has a time coordinate. And once you think of opinion, it becomes part of the past immediately right after, right? So in this respect, they're now independent of the mind once created. You can remember them and then reconstruct a new thought based on that, which is what we call change, but it's not actual change. You're formulating another opinion object at a different time. And those two things, if you define it that way, are two different objects, and they're all static. So just from his definition right there verbally, I know he doesn't have the luxury of analyzing things in retrospect like I'm doing now, but it just shows the tricky game of analyze something verbally without being able to go back. I mean, you're under, especially me at this point. I wasn't experienced as far as an online debate, especially with a person like Stefan, where it was hard for me to verbalize kind of what I was thinking, especially because this stuff is not this is not textbook material. This is all original, independent material. Maybe not original, but at least independent. And when it's independent, I don't have a problem set I can work it out with to solidify my understanding. So when I haven't revisited a topic in a while, I kind of fumble words. I misuse words, which I often do. And the one word in this interview I regret ever using was refer when I was defining objective. I presented several different definitions that were similar, and in one in the middle I said refer, and I tried to take it back, but it was too late. Stefan, he wouldn't quote unquote let go of my new definition, which is kind of ironic, but let's continue.
Determining what your opinion is, even if you know, all I have to do is get enough info. I mean, it's possible for me to obtain your opinion. It's an object that I can try to ascertain by even asking.
You absolutely can. And look, if I write down and I say, I believe that the Earth is banana shaped, then you can objectively prove that I wrote down and said, I believe that the Earth is banana shaped.
You know, lie detector tests give some indication. You know, I'm trying.
Yeah, you can get closer to it. You can get closer to it.
Yeah, because it's an object. It's something out there that I can try to measure.
All right, but let's go this. And so to the degree with which you can objectively establish.
So you can see that I'm equating objects and objective here, and that's kind of what my definition that does it. As soon as it's an object, it's objective, and vice versa.
Content of someone's mind, they go from subjective to objective because it's something you have objectively measured. If I say to you that I had a dream about an elephant last night, I guess you could run lie detectors and so on, and you might get some answers, you know, they're not 100% and so on.
But it's true. It's either true or false, right? Objectively, it's either true or false, whatever you say, depending on how specific you try to define your dream. It doesn't matter what I can prove or what I can know. Objectively, if you dreamt about an elephant or not, it happened, right? You can say that about it. That's what I mean.
Well, no, you can say that I said it happened. You can't necessarily say it happened.
No, even you can. I mean, I don't want to have to get into a materialistic argument, but basically,
there are crazy people who say, I'm currently riding a mongoose made of fire. And they may well pass a lie detector test about that, but that doesn't mean that their experience is objective. It's just they're having a subjective psychotic episode.
Yeah, but again, objective things do not rely on someone knowing about it. So it seems like you keep relying on that for your argument. Objectively, you had a dream about something, whether you even know about it or not, materialistically, right? I mean, that's why I say if you were to just suspend like the fallacy that they're mutually exclusive and actually put it as a subset, everything starts to make sense. But we are kind of straying.
So at this point, I realize that we've strayed from the original call-in topic, which is the subjective theory of value, right? We're absolutely not talking about value here. We're talking about actually the definitions of subjective and objective, which is my fault. I brought up the topic, the idea that one was a subset of the other, and that was a trivial proof of my case, right? It is true that once I do prove that, if I do prove that this becomes that if subjective theory value, if they claims value subjective, then it's objective by default. It's a trivial proof. I didn't need that. That's not the type of proof I wanted to argue against this with. As you'll see later on in the interview, I try to bring it back. I think at this point, I try to make a quick argument trying to bring it back to the subjective theory of value because I knew I wasn't ready for because I actually, this is a more macro topic. So it was the one I was actually mentally preparing for, not this one. So once it started to go into my idea, I mean, I was ready to argue it, but just the fact that I knew I was going to be scrutinized, I was kind of like, I wanted to go back to the macro topic of value. And that was an easy argument. And I'll make my argument soon.
If I accept your argument, then your argument makes sense. Well, of course it does. Absolutely. I fully agree.
And so here, man, Stefan's humor is funny to me. So you'll see me. I mean, I'm gonna enjoy his humor, but it kind of throws me off at the same time, right? To enjoy the humor, I kind of have to reflect on it, and then it kind of gets me off my train of thought. So sometime you'll see me laugh and kind of get kind of flustered searching for my next words.
With you, that if I accept your argument makes sense. Unfortunately, that's just not how arguments work.
Well, that's how definition works. All definitions is internal, right? It's an internal adoption of how you refer to objects in reality, so that you just can so your brain can make sense of it.
Oh, so you're saying if I accept your definition, then.
So when I say internal, I mean subjective, and by subjective, I mean arbitrary, and by arbitrary, I mean in a mathematical sense. So if you go to dictionary.com and you look up arbitrary and hopefully there's a mathematical alternative. Oh, misspell it. Okay, arbitrary. There you go. See, in mathematics, which is my training, that's why I tended to use it. It means undetermined, right? Not assigned a specific value. So when something's not assigned a specific value, that leaves freedom for you to actually assign it a value. So all internal definition, which is redundant, is arbitrary, right? It doesn't mean without any reason, right? Like probably one of these say like this: capricious, unreasonable, unsupported, right? An arbitrary demand for payment. It doesn't mean this. Mathematically, it just means it never was given a definition, just like a language. So that's a definition set. You arbitrarily pick it, but for reasons that you're in North America, you'd want to choose English. But the fact that you choose the language you speak, in some ways it's forced upon you, but ultimately you choose. Actually, you could like switch to Spanish or whatever. That makes it arbitrary, and again, I don't make any distinction between arbitrary and subjective, or internal, or something chosen by the mind.
All definitions are arbitrary. You agree with that?
All definitions are arbitrary.
And I mistakenly, in my head for my math training, all the times they've used arbitrary. I expect everyone to know it, and it's kind of foolish of me.
Right? Yes. The dictionary is just a proposal.
He's probably thinking arbitrary means capricious, right? Without any reason, just randomly selecting something.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And it's just, you and I could not have, and maybe it's because of the way you use language that you feel that way, but we couldn't have any kind of conversation if all language was arbitrary.
But we've implicitly agreed to use the English language, but to the degree of technicality for this debate.
Are you saying that in English, the arbitrariness of language means that one day I can refer to a tree as a tree, and the next day a tree can be a blowjob?
No. I mean, for instance, you gave, if you were to rewind the tape and listen to your definition of...
See, again, he's attributing it arbitrary with randomness.
Subject, you added to the definition. That's not what you'd find in the dictionary. And it'd probably be different. It'd be different in a...
And at this point, he's going to look it up, I think.
Subjective, existing in the mind.
Which, you see me laugh there, and it corresponds with the laugh in the video.
Belonging to the thinking subject rather than to the object of thought, opposed to objective, right? The dictionary says subjective is opposed to objective because...
Okay, so now here comes a problem I should have seen, but under the pressure of the debate, since at this point I think Steph is becoming a little hostile toward me, and I can show that. I can actually show a point where his hostility is just apparent, where it's clouding his judgment. So looking at the dictionary.com reference, definition of subjective: existing in the mind, belonging to the thinking subject rather than the object of thought, right? So again, here's a poorly defined term, or actually it references another term, object of thought. So you'd have to look up these two. Okay, anything existing in the mind belonging to the thinking subject rather than, so this is opposed to, or the opposite of the object of thought. And so when you look up the word object and if we need to thought, so I've already looked through this, and And this one is going to apply because look at the example given here, objects of thought. This is obviously the one it's referring to when it says, when it's using the term object. So you can see I'm not trying to be intellectually dishonest here just to prove my point, but there's actually reason here. Out of all these examples of usage, this one is going to apply because obviously that's the same phrase used there. So anything that may be apprehended intellectually, which I kind of agree with. If I were to reconstruct the definition of object for my philosophy purposes, I'd actually build upon this, an element of reality that can theoretically be apprehended intellectually, right? You may not need, it may be impossible, and I don't know, definition of impossible and theoretical, which is a thin line. So anyways, anything that may be apprehended intellectually. So that's what an object or an object of thought is. I don't think you have to look up the word object, thought, part of mental activity, reflection, consideration, reasoning, imaging. All these are valid definitions of, or examples of thought.
Objective is, quote, existing in the mind, belonging to the thinking subject rather than to the object of thought, opposed to objective. Now, opposed means not a subset of objective. Now, if you want to redefine the word, then that's something you need to.
Now, just looking at the dictionary definition, there's a reason why we'd want to redefine this word. Okay, so existing in the mind, belonging to the thinking subject rather than to the object of thought. That's saying that these two things cannot, you cannot have these two things at the same time, right? Because obviously objective will probably be an object of thought. Right here. So this is the opposite. This is what actually the dictionary definition of subjective is referring to. Here's the opposite. Being the object of perception or thought. Belonging to the object of thought rather than to the thinking subject. See? Now, to show this, to show these two inconsistent, I'd have to prove that there's an element or an object that is both existing in the mind, belonging to the thinking subject, and it's an object of thought, right? If I can do that, I've actually mathematically proven that this definition is inconsistent, logically inconsistent, or quote unquote not quote unquote, actually meaningfully contradictory. It's contradictory. It's contradictory. So and that this element here, I claim that you can think of your own thoughts. You can remember them, you can construct them, you can image them, you can do whatever you want, right? Each thought is an event in time. Once you think of it, it's already becomes part of the past, which you can remember, which is thought. Just the mere thought of constructing a thought is thinking about it. So anybody's thought is an object of thought, just by default. Even if you don't believe me, constructing it is thinking about it. Just remembering a thought is thinking about a thought, which makes it an object of thought. So again, I brought up the instance of where someone thinks of their own thought, making it an object of thought and belonging to the thinking subject and existing in the mind at the same time. Therefore, I find an element that fits both this and this at the same time, one's own thought. This applies to all thought here. So when this applies to any thought you can think of, any thought, any opinion, any internal definition, this makes subjective actually a subset of objective, which contradicts this. So I've proven that something is both this and this, both subjective and objective at the same time using this definition. So this definition, this added declaration here that they're opposed, and this word makes it contradictory, since I've shown that subjective is a subset of objective just using the dictionary definition set. So I've shown that it's logically inconsistent, demanding a redefinition to clarify all the contradictions here. And so so that's the case I didn't see here because I was pressed for time. You'll see that I had a hunch to this. I somewhere along the line state that you'd have to check the definitions, which I had time afterwards, of course. But in the heat of the battle, he actually challenged me to. And when you're challenged and you're up against a dictionary, you assume you're going to lose, which I did. And if I had known, I would actually took in the time while he was speaking to actually try to write a mathematical proof, which is one's own thought, which satisfies both definition.
Be honest about, right? So you need to come to me and you need to say, Steph, I'm going to work to redefine, to overturn one of these central pillars of philosophy, which is the distinction between what occurs in the mind and what occurs in reality. I'm going to take a radical approach. It's very much against the way that the language is used, but you didn't do any of that, right?
Okay, so...
No. Do you know that you're radically redefining the term?
No, because there are several sources to a definition. I'm not sure what source you're referring to right now. And we'd actually have to look at both definitions to see.
Okay, now listen, I got...
See, at that point, I was suggesting you actually have to verify that these are logically consistent terms, and that they're actually, it's just from since it declared it, they're opposing each other, you'd have to actually check for it if you wanted to use them with 100% certainty that you're not contradicting yourself.
No problem. No problem. If you can find me a definition of subjective that says it is a subset of objective, I would really be happy to hear that. Have you found such a definition?
No, you get that from probably the definitions of both of them, but I didn't think I'd have to get this, literal. But okay, so what
I don't know what you mean by literal.
By literal, I meant depending on a source. I'm the type of guy who didn't look up answers to math problems in the back of the book, only to check my answer, right? So it's like I have some stupid pride where I don't want to look things up. Like in a heated debate, you never find me Googling stuff unless it's just to verify what I've said already. But I never use something I look up to construct an argument. It's kind of prideful in a way, but and in this case, it kind of hurt me. But what can I say? It came out to be contradicting anyway, and I turned out to be right, which I didn't know at the time, and which validates a need for a redefinition.
The definition is relying on a certain source. Subjective is opposed to objective. Yeah. Now, if you want to redefine subjective as a subset of objective, then you need to put that forward up front and not just kind of steamroll people with your.
Okay, so that's 17 minutes. I'm basically conceding. Yeah, sure. Okay, I'm redefining. So what? Okay, let's just let me redefine it. But obviously, Steph's gonna hold on to the dictionary. The dictionary definition he just saw, and won't let me redefine it.
Opposite definitions as if they're just like, that's sneaky. Tell me you're going to redefine the language. Tell me you're going to redefine what the dictionary.
See, he's so sure after looking it up and it's declaring it opposing each other that he thinks he's won. But anyways,
I didn't know what your source is, right? Because when I quickly Googled subjective, I didn't get that definition.
What definition did you get?
There's alternate ones, right?
Read me an alternate one from a standard dictionary.
So what I'm gonna do is just Google subjective.
This one came from dictionary.com.
Anyways,
about your use of the word. It is not a subset. Now you could say, well, I want to radically redefine subjective and make it a subset.
See, he doesn't know he's wrong at this point, and neither do I.
That's something you need to rigorously do, and you can't just say that it's true.
Okay, so.
Right? Do you at least understand that according to the existing common use of the word, you are incorrect in saying subjective is a subset of objective?
I understand that, but first...
No. Do you admit that you are incorrect in saying that subjective is a subset of objective? I'm not trying to bust your balls here. We need to have some reality in the conversation.
According to that definition, yes.
Yes, so according to that declaration, yes. The definition actually supported what I was saying, that this extra declaration of opposed to objective and rather than, these are contradictory, but this right here and this right here actually proved my point, which I didn't know about, but let's continue.
Okay, I'm willing to be patient. If you want to weasel and find another definition, I will sit here and stare at the camera until you find a definition that says subjective is a subset of objective.
So
no, take your time. Honestly, take your time.
To truly prove me wrong, to make sure that everything's consistent, you'd have to Google the definition of objective and actually just verify, right?
Go ahead.
It's actually
Go ahead.
subject.
See, I wish I did.
You have this argument.
You didn't have to actually. You didn't actually have to Google. You didn't actually have to look at this because it's obviously just a mirror image of this. But it's right here. I didn't see it because when I first read it, this term was kind of confusing when I first read it. Object of thought. I started, and then I kind of lost my train of thought when I was trying to reflect on this while Steph was pounding me in the ground. And so
clearly, now what's obvious though is that you have this argument without having checked the definitions of the word.
No, I think I did.
Which is pretty suspicious behavior, And I'm just.
I did too. I at one point in the past I did. I just didn't think it's. I never thought it was important because creating any definition set for a mathematician is completely valid as long as this makes logical sense, right? As long as you don't contradict yourself, it's perfectly valid. I mean, but if you can point to another dictionary term, an alternate dictionary term that actually makes more sense of the world of reality, I'd have reason to switch over. But any logically consistent definition set is perfectly valid. Right? Spanish is the same as English. But the fact that, in a more technical sense, if grouping concepts a different way makes more sense of reality, it's a more effective definition set or language.
I'm trying to give you this annoying rigor, right?
I think I did. I think I may have done it on another source, maybe an actual dictionary. So you're going to get some variation between definitions, right? I mean, yeah, you're going to get some variations in the dictionary. Because
you're going to get some variations in language.
No, I have no problem.
That doesn't mean that you're going to find that subjective isn't a subset of objective.
Yeah, I have no problem. Redefining the term.
Okay, so here again, I admit, let's just drop that. I'll redefine it and let's analyze my definition set and see if it makes any more logical sense than anything you're familiar with, right?
But you don't even know that you're redefining the term. That's the problem.
Well, I thought I did. I'm not sure what I was referencing before. Okay, so just give me some benefit of the doubt.
We Googled subjective is a subset of objective, and there's no results found. Now, I get that Google is not all philosophy, and if you want to take on the task of defining subjective as a subset of objective, you could try and find a way to do that. I think you won't be able to do that because they're not the same thing, right? And the reason why this is important is
also I just wanted to give an alternate proof if just for the sake of that you think I'm using sophistry to say thinking one's own thoughts. An example to this. Or shows that this is contradictory. I can also think of another one. Anyone's mind is another person's external object, right? I can again. This goes back to the beginning of the debate. I can think of your thoughts, right? I may not know what they are, but I can try to like determine it. Just the fact that I'm contemplating about your own thoughts makes it an object of my thought. It still belongs to you, right? So it's still existing in your mind, belonging to you. But it's an object of thought. At this point, it doesn't specify whose object of thought it is, right? It can be, so it's my object. It can be someone's external object of thought. So in that case, again, it's the same thing. Therefore, they're not mutually exclusive, and therefore it applies to all thought. Therefore, all thoughts make up all subjectivity, and therefore all subjectivity is a subset of objective. Okay.
I mean, I've got this whole introduction to philosophy series on YouTube and on the podcast feed, which says that the whole purpose of philosophy is to recognize that it is the mind that makes mistakes. Subjective experience, subjective thought, subjective evaluation contains the capacity for error.
Yes.
Objective reality does not contain the capacity for error. So if you wish...
So this is another way of saying that everything objective or everything non-subjective, the way he's using it, right? So of course, I claim everything's objective, but using his definition set, like objective is a complement of subjective, that objective is true by default. Subjective can be subcategorized into both true and false. So the only way something can be false is if it's subjective, and that's kind of like what he means here. But.
To say things which are true and valid and right and proven, then you need to align your subjective experience with objective reality, which is why I'm an empiricist and why I believe in the supremacy of reason, because those are principles. Empiricism means to check your thoughts.
Just getting into it. I mean, I have training in a lot of sciences, physics, biology, anatomy, and in my training in math is inherently related because it's the structure of nature. But there's a lot of things that are wrong with empiricism. I mean, I have an argument that, of course, logic and mathematics is ultimately empirical, which I don't want to get into, but empiricism has a lot of pitfalls. I mean, so when you create hypotheses, when you test them, you must set up a controlled environment to and a controlled set versus the experimental set, and it's just very hard. You have to have precise instruments when measuring the effects of your experiment, and there's just a lot of pitfalls where experiments are fallible. Depending on technology, it's just one thing where I'm not sure what training Steph has in science, but he obviously doesn't see like the drawbacks, right? In statistical testing, for example, all statistical tests are based on they have a standard of error, right? The thing is, these tests can have a chance to be wrong under the null hypothesis, and we accept this a very low standard, a very high standard of being wrong, which corresponds to a very low chance for error. But I mean, just with statistical testing, you can see that it's hard to show things empirically, especially when it's an all claim, right? An all or none claim. When you want to prove some things, it's pretty easy because all you have to do is find one example. But when you're saying like everything is this or nothing is that, you actually have to show like all of these things are not that, or none of the, or you have to test all of them that they're not like that to prove the none alternative. It's a very tall thing to prove things empirically when it's an all or none claim. The beauty of mathematical proof is that, or quote unquote logical proof, you can look at just the definition and show that since they're inconsistent, like I've done here, I can disprove an all claim. That's pretty easy too to do in empirical, but I've shown that all subjective objects are objective themselves because every thought can be thought of by the thinker, and therefore it satisfies both these, especially this. It actually satisfies the definition of objective. And I've shown, just through reasoning that all of them are, without having to go through every single subjective object, every single thought and evaluating it just by reason alone. So there are drawbacks to empirical versus hard logic or mathematics.
Your theories against empirical reality, the basis of the scientific method, which is you have a hypothesis, you test it against empirical reality, and in any conflict between the products of the mind and what occurs in reality, it is the products of the mind which must give way.
See, this is the problem. You can't do that because you're assuming your experimental apparatus was perfect. Just because your instruments are not precise and you can't perfectly control for variables, makes it very difficult. And just because your results of your experiment contradict your hypothesis doesn't mean you reject it right away. I'm not, I don't have my main training in science, but I'm sure there's cases where experiment falsely told them they're wrong. And maybe later on, due to technology improving or something, they were actually to verify that they're actually right. But it's empirical thing is a tricky thing. It's human perception. I mean, but anyways, and versus hard logic, which is
which are automatically conceived to be false. Like if I come up with a theory that says the moon should come out of my armpit tomorrow morning, and the moon doesn't, I don't get to say.
See, if your theory is conditional, you must set up your experiment to have those conditions in order to check it, right? So if I say the moon's going to come out of your armpit when your body temperature is 98 degrees, exactly 98 degrees, no higher, no lower, it's going to be tough to set up that condition and check for it. But it can be done. I mean, to within a certain tolerance of error, but there are limits. It's going to be expensive and stuff. So with logic, it depends all on the mind. There's no apparatus to set up. There's no result. There's no conditions to check other than applying it through a thought experiment.
Well, my theory is correct. The moon just screwed up, right? We said, well, my theory is not correct because that's not how it's going to happen. So the whole basis, I believe, of the entire discipline that I am dedicating my life to is to take the principles of objectivity and apply them to people's subjective thoughts and experience so that people don't say, well, I do believe there's a giant invisible snow spider.
See here, all I'm doing is replacing what he's using, the term he's using for objective. I'm gonna all I do is replace that with non-subjective. So just that argument there, whatever he said, whenever he mentioned objective, replace that word with non-subjective, and I've it kind of clarifies a lot of things, especially when you want to use objective in a different way.
Sitting on my head, shitting thoughts into my brain, but you align your thoughts with objective reality through empiricism and objective principles through rationality. And so the capacity of the mind to err, to have mistakes, to make mistakes, is entirely why philosophy is needed. And the only way we know that a mind has made a mistake.
Philosophy is logic. It's not empirical. Even though sciences came out of it before, now nothing useful does, but that's beside the point.
Reference to reason and empiricism. And so the distinction between subjective experience and objective reality is the whole point of philosophy.
Subjective experience is a subset of objective reality. The fact that you had experiences, these are objects, these are events in time, these are measurable, these can be apprehended by the mind, they're objects of thought. Your experiences can be someone else's object of thought, let alone your own object of thought, right? So
when you say they're not really that different, or they're not different, or one is subset of the other, just so you know where I'm coming from, you're saying there's no such thing as philosophy.
No, I'm actually, that's just putting words in my mouth. But anyways, I think philosophy, modern philosophy, is bullshit. I mean, whatever's left over that didn't become a science, anything left over that's not a full-fledged science is kind of bullshit at this point. It's kind of like the guy who never left home. The more successful kids probably left home by now, and the failures kind of stayed there. And that's what philosophy is. It's a house of failure.
I mean, the beginning part of that statement there is why the whole reason I called.
Right? Let's go back to that beginning part of the statement. It is a long rant.
I'm dedicating my life to how it's going to happen. So
I think it was
your thoughts.
I think it was the ability to err,
which are true and valid and right.
The mind to err.
Subjective experience, subjective thought, subjective evaluation contains the capacity for error.
Yeah, and this is my case for this. If value is subjective, and subjective things have the possibility for error, to make false claims, That's why subjective value, your expected value, or what you think a value of an object is not actual value. That is error. The fact that there can be error shows that they're not the same. The fact that there's an instance where someone's wrong proves they're not the same set. If there's an element that's not part of both at the same time, that proves there's something else out there that's actually a different set. And that's what I call objective value. But anyways, let's go back to the point where we left off.
It's a slice of the pie, right?
Oh, I think
that you'd like to convince me, because if you can convince the mountain is objective.
See, and
subjective value.
I think
that's how I define object. And so now they work together.
It's fine. It's fine to be scornful. Argument, and there's a lot of very good thing as philosophy.
Okay, there's no such thing in philosophy.
I mean, the beginning part of that statement there is why the whole reason I called. Right?
So I'm trying to bring it back to the subjective theory value.
Value, or in terms of a good, value of a good. This is kind of like my argument. Why I propose that subjective theory of value is kind of ridiculous, because it's saying that your opinion is actual reality, right?
Well, first of all, ridiculous is not an argument. And
okay, so notice, like, man, I can't believe you just said that. I did say that the subjective theory of value was ridiculous, but then if you notice, I said because, and I gave a quick argument. So I didn't just present a claim that it was ridiculous. I actually made a full argument, and he's gonna blame me here for doing the former, right?
Right.
So
subjective theory of value was kind of ridiculous.
Okay,
like
so
my argument. I
notice the because.
Subjective theory of value is kind of ridiculous, because it's saying that your opinion is actual reality. Right.
Okay, that's good enough. That was a succinct.
First of all, ridiculous is not an argument.
Of course not. I made the full argument.
There's a lot of very smart people who have made this case, and if you're going to stand there after this intellectual performance so far and tell me that people like Ludwig von Mises and people like Hayek and people like all the other thinkers who have put this argument forward, that they're just ridiculous, and you're in such an elevated intellectual position to call them ridiculous after not getting the dictionary definition right. You are maybe sounding smart to yourself, but you don't look smart to other people.
I understand your perspective. I understand how that can seem, given not enough time to listen to my case. But as far as
I've been listening.
No. I understand. I understand the technical.
Okay, let's just skip over the ridiculous thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fine. It's fine to be scornful of other thinkers. I have no problem with that whatsoever. But you really have to make the case. If you put the scorn if you put the cart before the horse, so to speak, if you want to be scornful and call other people's arguments ridiculous, fine. But you've got to earn that right to call them.
But you've actually already argued for my case, right? The fact that you're wrong about reality when your opinion is so. Your opinion, which is what I claim is the only thing that is subjective. So if you accept my definition, and I'm redefining the term subjective here to be a subset of objective.
So notice I already admit I'm redefining it. And that wasn't a definition. That was actually just a declaration that they're a subset. So yeah, it does add to a definition, but it wasn't actually my technical definition of each, which I still haven't presented at this point. But once I said this, he's going to hold on to the old dictionary definition that claims they're opposing each other, and he won't let me continue. So
I define subjective as anything determined by the minds solely, right? Things that are determined by a mind is what I
okay, so actually he probably did let me define it at this point, but
call
it quickly gets rejected.
Objective objects. Anything to do with an object in reality is objective to me. That's how I define object. And so now they work together. One is a subset of the other. So taking this definition, your opinion of a value or the utility of a good to you can be wrong just like you say, opinion is not reality. Sometimes it can match, sometimes it doesn't. But the fact that you can be wrong shows that they're not the same. And that's what I'm trying to make the case for. The subject of objects, your opinion of stuff, refers to an object, a measurement of an object, of the value, in other words. And this thing can be wrong. So this whole idea of subjective value.
So you see here, like, when you're on a call with Steph, you don't see this video. Now, when you watch this thing on YouTube, the viewers are going to see this, and like this plays an effect. This has an effect on the people who aren't able to comprehend what I'm saying, which is probably a lot of people. It sways them to Steph's wavelength and wave pattern, the phase pattern. And when you see this, it just I never realized it until like my last viewing of the video. Like I didn't realize, maybe some of the comments trashing me kind of like were influenced just by the video alone. It's just an interesting phenomena, what video can do to sway a debate when another party doesn't have video.
It is totally kind of erroneous when you look at it that way. Wouldn't you agree? You kind of make.
I'm really working to follow. If I understand it correctly, you're saying that if your goal relates to an object which is objective, your goal.
See, now this is the problem too, because objective has an alternative meaning goal or an end, right? And so, and this is why when I'm trying to listen to this, it's making my head scramble when there's alternate meanings, when you're switching between alternate meanings for the same word, especially in the same sentence. It's kind of, it makes your brain explode right now.
Is also objective. In other words, if I want to climb a mountain, the mountain is objective, and therefore my desire to climb the mountain is objective.
My head's just scrambling
again,
right now.
if you accept my definition, everything subjective is objective, right? The fact that
no, I can't just. If you accept my definition,
accept it.
No, I'm not accepting your definition. That would be irresponsible of me because
I'm asking. I'm telling you,
if I accept that 2 and 2 make 5, some pretty crazy shit can go down in engineering, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to do it.
That's the thing, right? So if all definitions are arbitrary, personally, on an individual basis, you accept the definition arbitrarily based on how.
Don't accept that either. Don't accept that either. I mean, I can understand how having arbitrary definitions serves your case because you're defining subjective in a way that is the opposite of what its common use is. So I can understand that you'd like to convince me, because if you can convince me that definitions are arbitrary, then I have no basis by which to reject your definition, which makes your case, whatever it is, much stronger. But I don't accept the definitions are arbitrary.
It's because he's holding on to the old definition. So again, he's being inconsistent here.
Just like for the purposes of debate, one can adopt the other person's definition set just to continue with the argument.
No, I can argue the devil's advocate position, but I can't argue self-contradictory positions, right?
See, he hasn't checked my. All I said was subjective determined solely by the mind. Any object or anything in reality is solely determined by the mind, and objective is anything to do with reality. I forgot what I said, but anything to do with an object or something like that, to that effect. And you'd have to actually just by inspection look at the definitions and show that there's an element that there's an element in subjective that's not objective, and then you've proved me wrong. But he didn't do that. What he's doing when he's rejecting my definition is looking at the old definition, seeing the declaration of this opposed to objective, seeing my redefinition where I've made the declaration that they're a subset of each other, and it's actually consistent with my definition, right? Any object determined by the mind, right? And an objective, any object. So you see that one's a subset of the other just by definition. So it's consistent with my declaration, unlike the dictionary definition he's referencing. But he doesn't realize that because he's and something Freudian. Someone made a comment on there. Something interesting happened, like a Freudian reaction to holding on. shows that he's probably been through a lot of therapy sessions where the phrase was used. I don't know what it set off, but obviously it was emotional, and it caused him to reject the analysis of my definition at first. Unfortunately, I gave alternative definition, which he actually wrote down. The one point where he wrote down my definition was the one time I accidentally used the word I never wanted to use. Every other time I didn't use refer, and that one time he wrote it down. It is kind of like Murphy's Law. I don't know how that happened, but yeah, it was unfortunate for me, anyways.
Like see, that's the thing. So okay, so to prove the guy wrong, you adopt their definition and deduce a contradiction, and that's how you.
But no, if the definition is contradictory, then you can't go anywhere with it.
See, it's not contradictory because he didn't check my definition set. All he did is compare to the old definition.
It's not. It's only contradictory in the sense that you just looked it up and it doesn't match that one.
No, it's opposed to. Let me explain to you how it's contradictory.
See, I never said opposed to. Right? He's referring to the dictionary definition, opposed to, right here, and that's supposed to be let go. It's supposed to be disregarded, and start with a clean slate and go with the thought experiment. But fortunately, he's unable to do so. I'm not sure. And at this point, he's invested in being right. So the more he argues in it, the more he's going to make it seem like he's winning the argument by rejecting me and cutting me off and stuff. But
wolves are a subset of mammals, right?
Yeah.
Therefore, as a subset of mammals, wolves cannot be the opposite of mammals.
See, here's
No, forget that. You're saying the other person's viewpoint on. You accept that definition.
You're using a poorly defined opposite. You can either say complement, which has a specific meaning in set theory. So complement.
Okay, let me put it to you this way. Wolves are a subset of mammals in that wolves are warm-blooded and mammals are warm-blooded. All wolves are warm-blooded, but not all warm-blooded animals are wolves, right? That is a subset. It's a slice of the pie, right?
Yes.
Now, I cannot also say that the definition of a wolf is a cold-blooded animal and say that it is a subset of mammals. If all mammals must be warm-blooded,
yes,
then if a wolf is cold-blooded...
This is not the proper analogy. So the proper analogy was if I were to say, if wolves were like... well, a better one would just be to redefine artificial as a subset of natural, because there's a contradiction there that nature created humans. Therefore, everything humans create, nature somehow indirectly created. It's the same thing as that, where I've identified a paradox and I want to resolve the paradox. The fact that you somehow try to distinguish between natural and human action, when the one's just a subset of the other. It might be a special form of natural thing, but to call them different is kind of intuitively, connotatively, it makes sense because you've just been trained to distinguish between those two like that. But logically, it doesn't make sense, and just on rigorous inspection. That's the reason why I felt the need for a redefinition. I think I said this before. Sorry if I'm repeating myself, but
it cannot be a subset of
you're contradicting. So yes, you're contradicting yourself because you're adopting two definitions at the same time.
Exactly.
So here's the thing: when you arbitrarily accept the other person's definition,
he's adopting the old definition and my new definition.
No, but you see, you're saying to me that wolves are a subset of warm-blooded animals and wolves are cold-blooded at the same time. And you say to me, well, Steph, if you just accept that, then whatever. It's like, but that's still contradictory. I can't accept it.
I'm not saying the latter.
What I meant was I'm not saying the former, right? If I'm redefining, if I redefine cold-blooded as warm-blooded, I mean, I swap the definitions of those two terms. Then I can say wolves are cold-blooded, but I never said the former, right? The former would be the old definition. If I were to say this and then say what I'm saying, then I'm contradicting myself. So the whole notion that mammals are all warm-blooded would change, right? If I declare warm-blooded is cold-blooded and vice versa, mammals would be cold-blooded, therefore making wolves cold-blooded, and that's not what I'm doing. He's misanalogizing my argument.
That's the thing. You're holding on to the connotative definition while trying to accept.
That's what I'm doing. Okay.
See,
So
he's triggered right here.
you're looking online. You're looking online.
And so you notice, like, the viewers will be seeing this, and they'll empathetically be face palming themselves too. So
a definition that says they're mutually exclusive, and then I'm telling you to redefine it, but you're still holding on to that definition you're looking at. You got to let that go, right?
No,
triggered.
holding on is another insulting argument. Like I just have some weird emotional hang up to things making fucking sense, right? Saying I'm holding on and I refuse to let go. This is like bullshit Girl Guide emotional manipulation 101. No, you are making a contradictory statement. And then you're saying, well, Steph, if you just let go of consistency and rationality and common sense and philosophy and definitions and common sense and logic, my position makes sense. It's like, well, yeah, I guess so. But
math,
I don't know what that means anymore.
I can redefine an even number to be something not divisible by 2. I can totally redefine it. But then I can say that all numbers not divisible by 2 are even. And so when you accept that, it takes on all the characteristics and logical conclusions of an odd
number.
What you're doing is saying I can call a wolf a giraffe, and if you accept that the word giraffe means wolf, then blah, 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 blah. But that's not what you're doing.
Okay, so let me replay that part for you now.
I can totally and so when you accept that, it takes on all.
So now you'll see that he's already so emotionally invested. He's going to reject anything I say. So notice on his next argument, he's going to begin the argument by saying, this is what you're doing. Once I agree to that, I go, yeah, that's what I'm doing. No, that's not what you're doing. So
the characteristics and logical conclusions.
It's indicative of
an odd number. What you're doing is saying I can call a wolf a giraffe, and if you accept that the word giraffe means wolf, then blah, blah, blah. But that's not what you're doing.
Again.
Step 2. I can say that and logical conclusions of an odd number.
What you're doing is saying I can call a wolf a giraffe, and if you accept that the word giraffe means wolf, then blah, 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 blah. But that's not what you're doing. You're saying all mammals are warm-blooded, wolves are subsets of mammals, but wolves are cold-blooded. Right? You're not just changing the name of something, you're changing its definition when you say that subjective is a subset of objective.
Sure. It doesn't matter if you change the definition of a term. Again, the whole reason is to fix a paradox that the mind is part of reality. The fact that you say it's not, where is it? In its own dimension? It's kind of ridiculous.
You're changing a definition to something that is contradictory to the concepts of objective.
Yeah, the old concepts. The whole reason of redefinition is reconstructing a concept. That's the whole purpose of a redefinition, to hopefully better make sense of reality.
What you're doing is you're still holding on to the.
No, you say holding on again, man. I'm cutting you off because that is an emotionally manipulative argument.
Okay, so when I redefine it, so you're accepting my redefinition. Is that correct? Are you?
No. I mean, how many times do I say I don't accept your redefinition?
Not with respect to the other definition. Just for the purposes of a debate. If I'm wrong, or
it's not a debate if what you're saying is self-contradictory.
So here's the thing: when someone does that wolf thing, and if I were to redefine like mammals, mammals as warm-blooded, that's part of the definition, the criteria to define mammals. Mm-hmm. If I were to do that, and then say all mammals are also cold-blooded, right away that definition leads to a contradiction, right? So then you can say, okay, that's where you cannot adopt this definition and make logical sense. Right? So you haven't allowed me to. You keep holding on to the old definition. I'm trying to establish a new redefinition.
I want to try that one again because I don't want to cut you off, but you can't use this holding on. That is a rude thing to say.
Okay, just go with me for a second. Just kind of forget you ever looked it up on the internet and allow me to redefine it and just accept my redefinition. It's just a label, right? I can call it
just a label.
I can call it a
Well,
quark.
if everything's just a label, what the fuck is the point of this call?
Everything in so there's a subset of objective reality called quarks, right? Okay, so it's just arbitrary. So let's just call it quarks for a second, and then later on I'm going to come back and just say.
Okay, I'm going to stop here, and I'll continue this in another video.